We're coming from nothing and we're going back to nothing, but in between, what are we doing with the time we've got? How are we using it? How are we nurturing ourselves? How are we nurturing others? What do we need to be nurtured? Hello, my lovelies, welcome back. So, hold on, let's get this straight. Is it straight? Does it work? It works. I almost went live today. Can you believe it? And then I thought, no, actually, we're going to record this video. But this is going to be a series, and I want you to let me know if you want me to do this live. Maybe you want to do this live. And then you can, obviously check in and ask questions, because I think this is a really interesting topic in astrology that is not talked about that much. We are talking about the wheel of life, right? Because that's what your birth chart basically is. It's your wheel of your life. And based on your setup, your life is going to unfold. And it is going to unfold in a way where you obviously have a say. It's not that, everything is predestined. I believe to a certain degree, the soul chooses where it comes in, when it comes in, the parents and the whole family line, that is chosen by the soul. But the growth of the soul during life is part of what we call the free will, right? We can choose this way, or we can choose that way, or we can choose that way. It is based on consciousness. But that's not what we are talking about. We're not going to talk about consciousness. What we are going to talk about here is the setup, right, of the wheel, your birth chart, and what it means and what you can learn. Before we talk about things in detail, though, I want to remind you that obviously there are different ways of generating a chart, right? If you follow my channel, you obviously know I do modern astrology, Western astrology, and I use both. I shouldn't say both. I use two different house systems, because there are obviously more than two house systems in Western astrology. I use Placidus, and I also use the whole sign house system. Sometimes I use Porphyry when I do evolutionary astrology, when I look at the chart from that lens. But generally, I start with whole sign, right? I look at the chart from a whole sign perspective. That means one sign occupies one house. So we have one theme here. Let's say you're Virgo rising. You've got the Virgo theme going on in the first house, second house, Libra, Scorpio, so on and so forth. Now, I believe that humanity evolved. I'm sure you will agree with me to a certain degree. Sometimes we wonder, did we really evolve? But yeah, you can see that our consciousness level is different now than it was just 100 years ago, probably just 50 years ago, right? Consciousness is constantly evolving. Like every generation comes in with a higher consciousness. That doesn't necessarily mean that consciousness is lived out in a high vibrational state, right? That consciousness can also be lived out in a low vibrational state. Again, this is something for a different video, but the fact is that we evolve. Now, when we look at it from the astrology perspective, and we look at it from just the house system, right? We started with whole sign houses, right? That is the classical view, whole sign. And then at some point, astrologers came in and change the perspective. Don't overlook whole sign. For me, it's the bread and butter. It's the bread and butter. We started out with it. It's still true. It still holds the truth. It is the foundation, the basis. But we cannot ignore the other house systems and what they show us, what the view they show us, what insights they show us into our chart, into the chart of the individual. Right? There is another layer, and then there's another. You can just see all the layers, more depth. That's really what it is. And that's why I always use whole sign first to get an understanding of the foundation. And then I weave in usually Placidus to see what else is there. So when I look, for example, for my chart, right? When I look at it from a whole sign perspective, obviously my whole first house is Virgo. When I look at it from a Placidus perspective, there is that much Virgo in my first house and the rest is Libra. So I weave that in. And I weave that understanding in, but not before I have set the foundation. You got to set the foundation in any and everything you do in life. So I wanted to begin this video with like understanding that your birth chart is so multifold. It's so, it has so many layers, and you decide how many layers you want to look at, but always start with the basis. Don't move in with like the layers that come on top, because that's what most of us do when we start modern astrology, right? Most of us start with Placidus. When we get into astrology, like when I got into astrology like 25 odd years ago, I definitely looked at it from a Placidus perspective first, because that's how I learned it. And then I had to go back, and then I realized, oh, wait a minute, no. I built the roof before I built the foundation. I need to go back. Doesn't mean I don't need the roof, right? We all need a roof over our head, but we need the foundation first, because without the foundation, the roof is kind of pointless, really. Anyways, I don't really want to spend 100 years on this just little topic here, but I wanted to hone in on it, right? I want you to understand it. I want you to get that before we get into the wheel and the way we look at the wheel. Now, when I now speak of of the chart in general, I will use whole sign houses, right? I will just use the whole house, but you understand that there is another layer that you can add on top to get a deeper understanding, okay? So, to me, the journey doesn't start in the first house. We don't start the journey in the first house. That's when things become manifest, but we start the journey in the 12th house, because the seed is planted there. The seed is planted in consciousness first. The seed is planted in the 12th house, in the unseen, in the everything is possible. We are dissolving and we are becoming anew. So that's where the seed is planted. So we start there. Also, the 12th house represents a Piscean energy. I'm not saying it is exactly the same, but it represents a Piscean energy. So what is Pisces? Water, element of water. We are in the womb, held by water, right? The water is holding us. We are fed through that. So that's the first thing we need to understand. So that is, when we look at our chart, we look at the 12th. Most of us look at the first house first, right? But we want to look at the 12th house. What's actually happening in the 12th house? Because that will tell us a lot about the possibilities that we came here to unfold. So depending on what sign and what element you have in the 12th house, that will tell you a lot about the seed that was planted, how it was planted. If you, for example, you have Leo there, trillions possibilities of how that seed was planted, just alone by looking at that energy of the Leo energy. Now, one possibility is that it was playful, right? It was a playful, your parents just came together for fun, and then you showed up, right? But again, this is one possibility of the 12th house. So you're becoming. Also, you want to look at, do I have planets there? Do I have no planets there? Where is the ruler? Like, let's just stay with the Leo example. Where's the ruler? What house sits the ruler in? So, and that will tell you a lot about how you will get to unfold many of these possibilities that the 12th house holds for you. You look at the ruler, and where's the ruler placed? How is the ruler aspected? What house is it in? What are the themes that will get you to the unfoldment of those possibilities. It's such a beautiful journey. I mean, if we unpack the chart from that perspective, oh my God, it's so juicy. It's beautiful. I love looking at people's charts from that perspective. Now, I could talk about the 12th house forever, but let's get going to the first house. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So then, right, we are going from the 12th house. We planted the seeds. We were planted, right? We are in the womb. Now we are held by Piscean waters. And then we are coming into physical form, right? We are coming out. You might say we're already physical in the womb. And yes, that is true, but we are not separate yet, right? We are still connected to the mother. You're getting through the birth canal. The water helps you get through, but you need fire energy to push through. And so you come out, you become. There is a direction, first house direction. Our first house, our ascendant, gives us the direction in life. Where are we going? How are we going there? What's our lens? What lens did we come in with? How do we appear to others? What are we showing of us to others, right? The ascendant tells us that. The parts that we show. Again, the sun might shine through, like all the planets shine through that first house lens. And so that lens is also becoming. The way I look at the first house and the ascendant is that I believe that it holds the biggest growth potential. It is ever changing, right? Identity shifts are very common. It's nothing unusual. It is part of the growth that the soul chose. Now, let's say now we are out. We're in the first house, right? We have become our own individualized self, and by individualized, obviously physical self, I should probably say, because we are not an individual yet, because we are still super dependent on our caregivers, our mother. I also think that relationship with the mother is not just shown through the moon. I mean, it's obviously shown through the moon. There's no question about this, but it is also shown in the 12th house and the first house. That connection. It also tells us a lot about the mother and the mothering, the way we are mothered, who mothers us, who is involved in the mothering. The whole family story of us coming into this life can be shown in the 12th house and the first house, right? How we are going to be nurtured in the first few days, the first few months of our life. There's a lot of first house energy. The first house energy describes that really well. Also the 12th, again, the 12th, we have to always keep the 12th house in mind. I believe the 12th house is so underestimated because it holds everything. Everything. When we look at our life, we look at the 12th house, it holds it all. And when we are able, or once we are able to really tap into the 12th house energy and bring it forth, not keep it hidden, but bring things forth, we will rise. Our consciousness is just going to, our understanding of life will just grow exponentially. But anyways, I keep getting stuck in the 12th house. Let's go back to the first. Now from the first, we're moving into the second house. So the first house, we said natural fire energy, but again, it depends what sign you have there. If you have Capricorn there, if you have Virgo there, then that will tell us a lot about how you approach life, right? The element shows us a lot, tells us a lot about how you approach life and how approachable you are, right? The first house tells us a lot about how approachable you are. If there's Earth there, you're gonna be. It's not that you're not approachable, but people are not. You're not as open. You're not that open book. Yeah, there's a bit more boundary there when we have Earth energy in the first house. But let's move to the second house. Now, the second house, naturally the place of Taurus energy. So we have Earth here. Now, what is happening? So in the first house, we came into physical form. And the direction was made clear. setting up the chart in a certain way. Now in the second house, it is also a house of deep conditioning, right? The first 4 houses, our conditioning. If you want to understand our conditioning, all we have to do is look at the first 4 houses in our chart and see what planets are there, how many planets are there, are all of your planets there, and then you will understand how conditioned you are and what it takes for you to decondition. Now, we are in the second house now. We are becoming more physical. We're grounding into this world. And this is such an important place. The second house is such an important house because it will tell us how we ground into life. If you have Saturn there, very different energy than if you have Jupiter there. If you have both there, again, completely different, right? It tells us so much about our understanding of our innate worth. How worthy do we feel? How have we been raised? What was put onto us? Because the second house, for me, the biggest conditioning, because it is still very early in life when we are not thinking, right? We are not in the third house yet where we start speaking and, maybe understanding a little more of what people say to us. Still, it's going to take us a long time until we get to the 5th house where our brain then develops fully, where we start to be able to have discernment, right? We don't have that in the first 4 houses. We don't have a discernment yet. So we are deeply conditionable. And again, it depends what composition we have here. Do we start with earth? Do we start with fire? What do we start with, and how does it unfold? Now, having an air sign, for example, in the second house, it has a harder time to actually root in to this physical reality. There's always a little bit of a detachment with air, for example, also with water. It's a different type of detachment though with water. But if we have air in the second house, we are generally more detached from our innate worthiness. It's a mental exercise for us, and we have to eventually find a way to embody that worth. The embodiment will then help us to actually attract the life we want to live, to hold the energy of groundedness, to then live the life we actually want to live. So it depends what you have there, right? Second house, worth and value, and that then translates into your valuables. And money obviously is also a part of it, right? But money, that comes after. You have to understand that the second house, most of all, is about you understanding your innate worth and your values, the values you hold in this world, and how grounded you are. Again, if you have an air sign there, doesn't mean that you can't ground in. You can, but you just have to understand it from a different perspective. You have to go there from a different perspective, and you have to also, when you decondition the conditioning that isn't serving you, you have to go about it in a different way than someone that has fire energy there, for example. Right? But we will do this when we go through all the rising signs. We can talk about this in more detail. Now, third house also still early life conditioning, how we conditioned when it comes to basic education. Right? The third house is also obviously your immediate family, your aunts, your uncles, your siblings, your immediate neighborhood, the neighborhood you grew up in. How connected did you feel? How disconnected? How trusting were you? What's your understanding of that part of your life now when you look back? How did you become in this area? Also your schooling, your early life schooling is part of that. How did you feel in school? How did you fit in? Did you fit in? That will all, like, the third house is also related to the way you think, the way you communicate, from a very authentic place, right? We all learn to communicate a certain way because society requests that from us, right? We have to communicate in a certain way, but how connected are you to that way of communicating versus what is authentic to you? And will you be able to authentically express yourself? You know what you have to do? Well, you have to decondition your third house if you're not authentically expressing yourself in the here and now. So that's third house. Now we get to the fourth house. Now we get to the juicy part, right? Mother-father energy. We always connect, well, it depends who you ask, but some people connect the fourth house with the mother, others with the father. For me, both are there. They are both in the fourth house. We find them in other places as well, but they are definitely both also in the fourth house because they made you. They're your family. They're your family line, your ancestry line, right? They're both there. Nothing you can do about it. The fourth house, natural place of Cancer, the moon energy. The moon, what's the moon? Subconscious, all the conditioning and how we then emotionally digest based on how we've been conditioned. And again, the natural energy here is water, the element of water. But what if you have, let's say, if Sagittarius here, like fire energy? What does that mean? Like, how does home feel to you? How stable is home to you? Does it feel stable? Does it feel nurturing? What does nurturing in the home mean to you? How are you nurtured? If you have Sagittarius sitting in the fourth house, your understanding of home and feeling nurtured and safe is very different than someone that has Capricorn there. Yeah, we have to understand that. We need different things to feel home. If you have Sagittarius there, you're naturally much more at home in other places, in other countries. You probably do not live at home, your birth home anymore. Doesn't mean that if you have Scorpio there, you still live at home. You might also have moved, but that Sagittarius energy in the fourth house generally tells us we are moving far away from home. Our new family, the new family that we make, will be far away from home. This can also mean Sagittarius in the fourth house, for example. Again, we will talk about this once we go through the actual rising signs, but let's just say, as an example, you have Sagittarius here. Your ancestry might have come a long way. They might have been from another country. Your parents might have come from another country than the country you've been born in. So there is the theme of traveling is very prevalent in your family line, and then you might or might not continue that, right? You might work with it in a different way. It depends, but that is a big, huge theme, and there is a lot of destabilizing. Like when we have fire here, there's a lot of destabilizing energy in the fourth house, right? The fourth house holds it. The fourth house is really foundational. We need to really understand that area to understand how to get from one place to another in life, how to grow into the 10th house. But if you don't understand your fourth house, you can't fully probably blossom in your 10th house. Now, fifth house, the fifth house, we are growing up, but we can still be conditioned in this area. However, the fifth house tells us more about our creative self-expression and how to bring it forth. It also tells us the way we relate to children. Doesn't mean that it can tell us if you have children or not. That's not. I've seen thousands of charts, guys. Like I've seen charts that are very similar and had completely different outcomes. It doesn't say that the fifth house with, I don't know, Saturn there, Capricorn there, that you're not gonna have children. That is not what it says, but it tells us your approach. It tells us the approach can then unfold in different shapes and forms, but there is an approach with your energy in the fifth house to children, to creation, the creation process. How do you go about the creation process? And this is truly also informed by the fourth house, right? Because it's a continuation. You need to understand we are always continuing and we also evolving. So let's say the fourth house and then the fifth house, we are continuing the journey that we started in the 4th house or that we gone through in the 4th house, we are continuing it in the 5th house, but then also we evolving it. And then again in the 6th house, continue and evolving. It's always about evolving. Each house, there's another evolution. So in the 5th house, it tells us about our creation energy. Also love, right? Love is part of the 5th house. And the way we approach love, the way we understand love. What I have seen with like, especially Capricorn here, or strong Saturn influence, that doesn't mean that we don't have love. No. Of course we will. But it usually comes a little later. We go through different hoops there to learn that energy on a deeper level, right? That again, like if you have fire energy here, this house will unfold very differently than if you have earth energy here, because it's a natural fire house, right? It's the natural energy of Leo, the sun. So then from here we go into the 6th house. So we're going from the teenager now, we are turning into an adult, right? And we have a day-to-day rhythm. We create habits, and hopefully healthy habits, right? This is also the house of health. It tells us about the way we approach health, depending on also what energy is in here. Naturally, that's Virgo energy, right? Virgo is very meticulous. It's a very meticulous energy. Having this in the 6th house shows us a very different approach to health than, for example, having Aries here. If we have Aries here, doesn't mean that we are not inclined to living healthy, but we're not very structured. The approach is not structured. If Virgo has a very structured approach to it, because earth energy, also a very grounded approach to it. If we have Aries energy in the 6th house, we are generally have more energy to begin with, but we also run out. Like we have the energy, but we use it up really fast and then we run out. And eventually we will always, with Aries energy, if we are not taming that fire energy, we will always lay flat at some point, right? We will exhaust ourselves. So we'll have to become aware of those habits that we create in the 6th house. Because also remember, we kind of keep evolving. The 6th house is related very strongly to the 2nd house and the 10th house. Because naturally they are all earth energy, right? They're all connected. It's a trine energy, that they inform each other. So your 2nd house informs your 6th house, informs the 10th house, and again back to the 2nd house, right? It's an information highway. So the way we approach and live out our day-to-day, the way we live in the 6th house, right? The way we do the 6th house will tell us a lot about how quote-unquote successful we're going to be in the 10th house. Now let's continue from the 6th house to the 7th house. Now the 7th house is the house of relationships, right? It is the natural mirror of the identity we hold in the 1st house, but it is again also an evolution from the 6th house. So if we don't have our 6th house in order, if we are not living aligned in the 6th house, our 7th house stuff will also not flow properly. It will also not be aligned. Because again, this is a continuation. It's and then also an evolution. So if you don't have your 6th house in order, you will also struggle in the 7th house. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have your 6th house in order, you will have the most amazing relationships per se, right? There's still more to it, because again, this is the next stage. It's another stage, the one-on-one relating, where we go deeper. Through the other, we see ourselves clearer, right? There's this beautiful saying that only in the heart of the other can you see yourself clearly, and that is beautifully describing the 7th house. Because that's where we get to know ourselves through the other, right? there is this connection back to us, reflecting back to the first house. You can see everything is connected here, and it's just so beautiful. Like so beautiful. So again, based on what sign we have here in the 7th house, that will tell us a lot about how we approach relationships in the healthiest way, what is working best for us. Again, also we have to look at the ruler. Where does the ruler sit? Do we have other planets here? What's going on there? And again, when I look at the rulership, I always start like I do with the house system. I always start at the basics. I start with the old ruler, the traditional ruler. So when we have Pisces there, I look at Jupiter first. I don't neglect Neptune. I look at Neptune too, because Neptune, for me as a Pisces, I can vouch for that. Neptune is a big deal. But I start with looking at where is Jupiter. For me, when I look at the 7th house also, and I look at the ruler, I look at it from the perspective of, and I play with this, you know, you can play with a lot of these things. Where are you going to meet your partner? How are you going to meet that partner, depending on where the ruler sits, right? Jupiter in the 1st house, it's always personal. It's always a direct meeting. If the ruler is in the 4th house, you meet it through family, through the home, in someone's home, in your home, right? Like I play with these kind of things as well. But I keep sidetracking. Let's continue. Now we move on to the 8th house. Now we're getting to the stuff of the other that then also is reflecting back our own stuff, our own worth, right? For me, the 8th house is the epitome of understanding yourself, diving deep into your own underworld. And obviously also it holds the other stuff, the other things, other people's money shows up here, but we want to go back. We're want to go back to the deeper level. It reflects our own feeling of whatever it is we're feeling, unworthiness or, you know, grandiosity or whatever we are feeling about ourselves. And we are diving deep, and then we're looking at it from a perspective of, does it serve us? Are we our best self in that way? I think that's why relationships are so juicy, so beautiful, so potent, because again, we can see ourselves so much clearer through looking through the lens of, you know, the other person's heart. So we started the journey in the 7th house, but then in the 8th house, we dive really deep. Like we dive deep, we are relating, right? That's also the time where the 7th house, it's the house of marriage, right? We are starting life with someone, and then in the 8th house, we are living life with someone. That's a whole different ball game, right? How ready are you to face all your shadows? Because that's also what the 8th house holds, your shadow. How ready are you to face all that? Now then in the 9th house, we are going back out there into the world, right? We got to know ourselves on this deep level in the 8th house. Now we are ready to look at the bigger picture, because we can hold so much more now, because, you know, we've done the work. And now in the 9th house, we look at our belief system. What do we believe? Go back to the 3rd house. What did you learn? How have you been conditioned? Is that true for you actually? And is it helping you to get where you want to go, aka 10th house, success in life? But we're not there yet. Let's stay in the 9th house. Now in the 9th house, we look at it from the perspective of, what do I believe? What beliefs serve me? Religion falls into this arena as well. What is your religion? Are you part of a religion? Because religion and spirituality, two different things. It is more of a dogma. Spirituality in and itself has nothing to do with dogma. It is free-flowing. Again, 12th house energy. We're going back there. We're getting there again, but let's just stay in the 9th house. Dogma. What dogma do you want to believe in? Do you want to believe in a dogma? Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it, right? Dogma is man-made. It's a man-made understanding of what God is. Now you can buy into that, or you decide not to buy into that. But again, what is true for you? That is the most important thing. It might be true for you and for the life you want to live, to be part of a religion, to live in that community of a particular religion. But for other people, it might not be right. Again, you have to find your own truth. Ninth house, house of truth. What is your own truth? And you will not find it if you haven't done the work in the 8th house. And that work is ongoing, right, in life. We're not diving into the 8th house once and then we come out and then we're ready to fully live. No, it usually is like this. Go in, come out, in, out. And through that, we evolve a little more. It's like that upward, what do you call it, spiral, right? It goes upward. But it is not like this. You're not diving out like this. So you're doing this. So your truth can only be found if you've done, or if you're doing your inner work, your shadow work in the 8th house. Healing the inner child through that as well. Deconditioning. And then you go out into the world, you get to know other cultures, other religions, and you learn through that as well. What is true for me here? What do I want to take on? What can evolve my understanding of life? Philosophies. All of that plays a part here. And then from here, we are ready to live our purpose, because we've done all that work, right? We've done our inner work. Still doing it, obviously. It's like I said, it's an ongoing part. But once we get to the 10th house, now we are ready to live our purpose. The question is, though, are you living your purpose? Is what you do your purpose? And I'm not saying that everyone has to have a job that they would consider their main true purpose in life. I think it would be lovely if that would be the case for you, but I don't think it is necessarily the case from a perspective of how we look at work, what work means for us. You might find your purpose being a mother. Like that might be your purpose in this life. Maybe you work on the side, like as a secretary, or like maybe you would do art on the side and you sell your art, you paint and you sell it, but you would consider being a mother your purpose. Well, you could also consider being an artist your purpose, and you do that. But what I'm trying to say here is your purpose unfolds through you living life. You're getting a little closer. The closer you get to yourself, the closer you get to the core, the nucleus, right? That part you hold really deep. The more you allow this to unfold, the clearer your purpose will become. And I think our purpose also evolves. It is not the same thing, because we evolve. So it doesn't mean that one day you're a lawyer and then you're going to be a doctor. Might be true for you, but that's not what it means. It means that maybe you are a doctor. Maybe you've always known you wanted to be a doctor. And then within that you evolve. You evolve your understanding of medicine, biology, the body, the way you approach medicine, all of that. And that is a story that we find in the 10th house. And again, do you have a mutable sign there? Do you have Earth there? That will give us a good indicator of how to approach that, how to also settle into that. Then from here, we get into the 11th house. Usually the 11th house is looked upon as the house of friendship, the house of community, the house of the humanitarian. And the humanitarian came in here because, once we have our success in the 10th house, now we want to give back, right? We filled up our own cup and now we're giving from overflow. And that's also something I really want to hone into. You want to give from your overflow. You don't want to give from an empty cup, because you have not much to give there. And it's not that you have to give a lot. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's you got to fill yourself up first, because that is also what gives to others. Like you being truly authentically yourself, living your purpose, is also giving. Because remember, we are all connected through this beautiful energy we all can't see, but we are connected through it. So yes, obviously you want to maybe give in a physical way, you know, you want to give your time, maybe you want to give money, you want to give your attention, whatever you want to give. But at the same time, you also give your energy of living authentically in the 10th house. And that also shows up, you know, in friendships. You being in friendship, how do you give? What are your higher aspirations? There are aspirations in the 10th house, but then the 11th house has the higher aspirations. What is your higher aspiration? Like from the place of now I'm full, what am I giving? What am I giving to the world? What am I giving back? Because the world gave me so much, right? The universe gave me so much. Now, how do I reciprocate? Because we want to reciprocate. We also see that in relationships, right? If we don't find our reciprocal, we will always be shaky. We need to find the person where we have a reciprocal relationship to really blossom. There are tons of transactional relationships, and I'm not saying they are wrong. I mean, I don't want to judge that. I know it wouldn't be for me, but I generally not saying it's wrong, but I don't believe you can be fully and completely yourself if you're in a transactional relationship. You gotta have, do you know, see the difference? Like there's like this reciprocal, it's like the yin and yang kind of energy that we aspire to. And how do we get there? We get there from the heart. We're never going to get there from just thinking our way there, or intellectualizing it, or making sense, or it has to make sense. You give from your heart knows. And when I say your heart knows, I'm not saying let some other people roll over you and, you know, you're just being the good person. No, I'm saying in your heart, you know what is right. You have strong boundaries, right? You know what is right for you, but you do it from the heart. You do it from a compassionate place, from a loving, caring place. And sometimes from a loving, caring place, you have got to end something. So you are now on the 11th house, friendships, higher aspirations, community. How do you give back to your community from your filled cup that you brought from the 10th house? Like how does that work? And again, the 11th house, depending on what energy you have here, naturally it's the house of Aquarius, so it's air energy. But if you, for example, have water here or earth here, you approach this area from a very different place. You know, how mutable are you in this area? You have to understand that for yourself. Again, we will talk about that when we talk about it from the perspective of the rising sign. But generally speaking, the 11th house will tell you, or your 11th house will tell you how you can benefit the collective the best, and also how you can live your dreams, your hopes and dreams in the most beneficial way, again, for others, but also for yourself. And the 11th house is naturally not a selfish place because it's the opposite of the 5th house. The 5th house is where we really focus on the self, our self-expression, but self is still involved in looking out for the greater good. And now we're coming full circle. We are coming back to the 12th house. We come back to the surrender into self and into nothingness. And from that place, we then again start anew. I don't know why, but I'm just thinking of yoga and the way I structure a yoga class. I always start with child pose and I end with, I think it also shows us the cycle, right? Like we're starting with this, planting the seed, like child's pose. It's a deeply nurturing pose. It's also a pose that is very inward focused. It's the pose in itself is inward. And then, you know, throughout the yoga class, we're opening up. And then Shavasana, we're giving ourselves away to universe, right? Because we understand we are one with the universe. So and it's kind of like this, it's a similar cycle, really the same cycle, just explained differently in astrology. We're coming from nothing and we're going back to nothing, but in between, what are we doing with the time we've got? How are we using it? How are we nurturing ourselves? How are we nurturing others? What do we need to be nurtured? My loves, that was long. I hope this was insightful. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And yeah, I'll talk to you in the next video.